Julian Croft never imagined that a simple Tuesday would irrevocably alter the course of his life. A renowned architect, he had just walked off a chaotic construction site, his mind overloaded with flawed blueprints and frustrating arguments. Craving the pristine silence of his penthouse overlooking Central Park, he decided to return home 3 hours earlier than usual. As he stepped out of the private elevator and into his foyer, he was met with a scene that defied all logic. Elena Petrova, the housekeeper who had worked for him for a quiet and efficient 2 months, rushed towards him. Her eyes were wide with a terror he'd never seen before, and she raised a gloved hand, pleading with him before he could even utter a word. "Please, Mr. Croft, for the love of God, don't make a sound," she whispered, tears streaming down her pale cheeks as she gestured frantically toward the second floor. Julian's first instinct was cold fury. How dare this woman command him in his own home? But something in her gaze stopped him. It was pure, unadulterated desperation, an anguish so profound it momentarily quelled his anger. It was then that he heard it. The soft, gentle sound of a child humming a simple tune he didn't recognize. The melody was sweet, innocent, and utterly out of place in the sterile, minimalist sanctuary he had so carefully curated for himself. "My daughter, she's upstairs," Elena explained, her voice barely audible. "She doesn't know anyone is home. Please, I'm begging you, just give me 1 more hour." Julian's face hardened into a mask of stone. This was a severe violation of trust. He paid a premium salary to ensure his privacy and the sanctity of his home were absolute. He had made it explicitly clear, no guests, no exceptions. "How could you possibly bring a child into my home without my consent?" he murmured, his voice low and dangerous, forcing himself not to shout. Elena squeezed her eyes shut, as if bracing for the inevitable. "Sir, I know it's inexcusable, but there was an incident at her school today. I had no other choice." "The school nurse called," Elena whispered, her voice trembling. "She said Anya had a terrible panic attack, and that I had to come get her immediately." Julian crossed his arms, his expression a cold mask, waiting for an explanation that could possibly justify this outrageous breach. "My Anya, she has severe anxiety, sir. She can't handle new places or crowds without falling apart. And today, I had nowhere else to go." Her voice cracked with emotion. "The woman who usually watches her after school had a family emergency. I couldn't afford to miss my shift today." Julian's silence prompted her to continue, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "Why? Because if I lose this job, we'll be evicted tomorrow. I am 2 months behind on rent as it is." Julian felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. There was something about this woman, her raw, unfiltered desperation, that struck an unexpected chord within him. He was a man who designed his life to be free of such messy, unpredictable emotions. Yet here they were, embodied in the trembling form of his housekeeper. "How old is she?" he asked, his voice softer than he intended. "7, sir. She's a quiet, gentle girl." "She has no idea she's done anything wrong," Elena added, a fresh tear tracing a path down her cheek. "To her, this is just a quiet, safe place to be until I finish my work." From a floor above, the humming continued, a little louder now. It was a simple, carefree melody about stars and the moon, sung in a voice so pure it felt like a trespass in the calculated stillness of the apartment. Julian tested the boundary, his voice regaining its sharp edge. "And what if I say no? What if I call building security right now?" Elena swallowed hard, her fear momentarily replaced by a fierce maternal resolve. "Then you will do what you must, and I will accept it. But please, I beg of you, just don't scare her. Anya has already been through so much." There was something in that plea that dismantled all of Julian's certainty. He, who had absolute control over every line and every shadow in his life, was suddenly confronted with a variable he had no idea how to manage. "I'm going up to see this child," Julian declared, moving toward the minimalist floating staircase. "No." Elena stepped in front of him, her body language a wall of sheer desperation. "Mr. Croft, please, she can't see you like this. So suddenly, she will panic, and it will be awful." "Panic? What are you talking about?" Elena took a shuddering breath, as if about to confess her deepest, most painful secret. "Anya is terrified of men, sir. After her father, after he did terrible things to us, she can no longer be near any man without suffering a crippling anxiety attack." Julian froze, his foot hovering over the next step. The revelation struck something deep within his own memory, a sealed-off chamber in his past that he never, ever opened. "What kind of terrible things?" he asked, his voice strained. "Things a 7-year-old girl should never see or hear, sir. Elena choked out. Things that still make me wake up in a cold sweat, feeling like I failed to protect her. As if on cue, the humming from upstairs ceased, replaced by the sound of small, shuffling feet. "Mama?" A tiny voice called out. "Mama, where you?" "I'm coming, my love." Elena called back, her tone miraculously transforming into one of calm reassurance. "I'm just finishing up something down here." "Can I come down?" the voice asked. "No." Elena answered quickly, a no command in her gentle tone. "You stay and play with your drawings. I'll be up in just a minute." Julian watched the exchange, and for the first time in years, felt a stirring in the frozen landscape of his heart. Ever since his wife, Isabel, had passed away 5 years ago, this penthouse had become a silent mausoleum, a monument of precision, beauty, and emptiness. "Is she in the guest suite?" he asked quietly. "Yes, sir. The one at the end of the hall. She loves the big window, so she can see the whole world from up there." Julian took another step up the stairs. Now driven by a complex curiosity he couldn't begin to unravel. Elena followed him, her body as taut as a wire. As they reached the second-floor landing, the sounds from the guest suite became clearer. It was no longer humming. Now, it seemed the child was talking to herself, inventing different voices, as if performing a quiet one-person play. "What is she playing with?" Julian asked, his voice a low murmur. "Her paper friends," Elena whispered back. "The characters she draws." Her therapist said it's a good way for her to express her feelings through her art. Julian glanced at her. "Therapist?" "Yes. Anya needs professional help because of the trauma, but it's expensive, sir. My insurance barely covers any of it." He approached the door to the guest suite, which was slightly ajar. Peeking through the gap, he saw a small girl sitting on the plush white carpet, surrounded by sheets of paper. She had her mother's pale skin and dark, wavy hair tied back in 2 simple braids, and she wore a plain but clean dress. What seized his attention, however, were the drawings. There were dozens of them, all rendered in bright, childish crayon, but they shared a deeply disturbing pattern. In scenes of parks and happy homes, the father figure was always violently scribbled over with heavy black strokes, an angry void where a person should be. "Why does she do that? To the man in the drawings?" Julian asked without turning around. Elena moved closer, her own gaze fixed on the scene. "Because to her, a man is synonymous with danger. Her father, he used to scream, break things. He would hit me in front of her." Her voice was barely a breath. "The day he left for good, he told Anya that any man who ever got close to us would do the same thing. He planted that poison in her head." As they watched, the little girl picked up a bright yellow crayon and began to draw a large, smiling sun over 2 female figures holding hands. Clearly herself and her mother. "How long ago did he leave?" Julian asked. 8 months ago, sir. Since then, she can't even be in a room with a male teacher at school. She can't even make eye contact with the doorman. Elena added, her voice a pained whisper. "If a man gets on the elevator with us, she tries to hide behind my legs, to make herself invisible." Julian watched the child for a few more moments, mesmerized by her intense concentration. There was something hypnotic in the way she created these vibrant worlds on paper. Worlds where men either didn't exist or were reduced to monstrous black scribbles. "Mama?" Anya called out suddenly. "Are you out there?" Elena flinched back from the doorway. "Yes, my love. I'm here. Because I thought I heard a man's voice a little while ago. Were you talking to someone?" Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. She shot a panicked look at Julian. "Oh, that must have been the podcast on my phone, sweetie. You know, I sometimes listen to the news while I work." There was a pause. "Oh, okay. Can I finish my butterfly drawing?" "Of course," Elena said, relief flooding her voice. "But you stay right there, okay?" "Okay, Mama." Julian stepped away from the door, his chest tight with an emotion he couldn't name. It felt as if he had just witnessed something sacred and profoundly intimate, but also something he had no right to see. "Let's go downstairs. We'll talk in my study," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. In the study, surrounded by architectural models and leather-bound books, Julian poured a measure of scotch and offered Elena water, which she accepted with a trembling hand. "How long have you been a housekeeper?" he began. 5 years, sir. Since I left my ex-husband. And before that," Elena hesitated, looking down at her hands. "I was a teacher. I taught 1st grade in a public school in Queens." Julian paused, the glass halfway to his lips. "A teacher? Why didn't you mention that when I hired you?" A sad, knowing look crossed her face. Because people don't hire a housekeeper with a master's degree in education, Mr. Croft. They think you'll feel you're too good for the work, or that you'll leave the moment a better opportunity comes along. So why did you leave teaching? When Anya was born, I realized she would need special care, not just because of what happened later with her father, but because she's always been a very sensitive child who requires constant attention. The rigid schedule of a teacher, it wasn't possible to give her what she needed. Julian stood up and walked a massive window, looking out at the perfectly ordered grid of the city below, the stark contrast of fragile, chaotic world in the room directly above his head. How much do you make a month between all of your jobs? Julian asked, his tone more like an interrogator than an employer. Maybe $800, sir, on a good month, Elena replied quietly. I'm here 3 times a week. I clean a brownstone on the Upper East Side on Wednesdays and Fridays, and on Saturdays, I clean a small dental clinic in Brooklyn. And that covers your expenses? Elena let out a bitter, humorless laugh. It doesn't cover half, Mr. Croft. Our rent is $1,000. Then there's utilities, food, and Anya's therapy sessions. The medication for when she has an attack. How many attacks does she have a month? He pressed. Lately, 2 or 3. It's always triggered by something that reminds her of her father, a man shouting on the street, or even just seeing someone from a distance who has the same build as him. Julian sat back down on the leather sofa, his mind grappling with the sheer, brutal reality of her situation. And what do you do when she has an attack? I hold her, Elena said simply. I hold her as tightly as I can. I sing the lullabies she loves, and I just keep repeating that she's safe, that no one will ever hurt her again. And that works. Most of the time, yes, but it can take an hour for her to calm down. Her therapist says she needs more intensive treatment, but that kind of help is impossibly expensive. At that exact moment, the soft patter of footsteps sounded on the stairs. Both of them froze. Mama. Anya's voice was suddenly very close. Oh, God, Elena whispered, jumping to her feet in a panic. Anya, go back upstairs, sweetie. But I wanted to show you the butterfly I finished. The little girl appeared in the doorway of the study, proudly holding up a sheet of paper, and then she saw Julian. Her face transformed instantly. Her bright, curious eyes widened into circles of pure terror. The drawing fluttered from her fingers to the floor. Her entire body began to tremble violently. There's a man, she whispered, stumbling backward. Mama, there's a man here. Anya, calm down, my love, it's okay. Elena pleaded, rushing toward her. But it was too late. The girl was already lost in a full-blown panic attack. She started screaming, a raw, piercing sound, and scrambled back toward the stairs. In her haste, she tripped and fell hard, scraping her knee. The cry of fear morphed into one of absolute, inconsolable agony. Don't let him get me, Mama. Please don't let him get me. Elena rushed to her, scooping her into her arms and trying to soothe her, but Anya was inconsolable. She clung to her mother's neck, sobbing hysterically and repeating that she wanted to go home, to go away from here. Julian stood paralyzed, a spectator to a horror show he had unwittingly directed. This tiny child was utterly terrorized by his very presence. He, who had never intentionally harmed a soul, who prided himself on his quiet civility, was being seen as a monster. I am so sorry, Mr. Croft, Elena said, her voice breaking as she tried to comfort her daughter. I'll take her home right now. This won't happen again, I promise. No, Julian said, the word surprising even himself. You're not leaving yet. Elena looked at him, bewildered. Sir, take her upstairs, he commanded softly. I'll wait down here until she's calm. Then we will talk. Elena stared at him for a moment as if she couldn't comprehend the words, but then she nodded and obeyed, carrying the still sobbing Anya up the stairs. Julian bent down and picked up the drawing the girl had dropped. It was a brightly colored butterfly, soaring over a tiny, detailed cityscape. In the corner, printed in careful, childish letters, were the words, for the man with the windows to the sky. He stared at the drawing for a long time, feeling a strange and unfamiliar warmth spread through his chest. How long had it been since he had received a gift? How long since he had encountered something made with such uncorrupted innocence? From upstairs, he could still hear Anya's ragged sobs and the gentle murmur of Elena's voice. Drawn by the sound, Julian walked slowly up the stairs, stopping in a hallway just out of sight of the guest room door. It's okay, my love. The man isn't going to hurt you. But he was here, Mama. Anya cried. He was in the house, just like Papa used to be. No, Anya, Elena said firmly but gently. This man is not like your papa. This man has never yelled. He has never hurt anyone. How do you know? Anya whispered. Because, Elena replied, her voice soft and certain. I have worked in his home for 2 months and has never been anything but quiet and respectful to me. He even gave me a raise last week. Julian was taken aback. It was true. He had increased Elena's salary the week before, a logical decision based on the fact that her work was consistently flawless, often going beyond her contractual duties. He never imagined it would be used as evidence of his character. Is he to tell us to leave because of what I did? Anya whispered. I don't know, my love. Elena answered honestly. Maybe. Then it's my fault, the little girl concluded, her voice heavy with shame. If we have to leave our apartment, it will be because of me. Don't you ever say that. Elena said, her tone firm but gentle. You are a child. The responsibility always belongs to the grown-ups. Nothing that happens is ever your fault. Julian retreated back down the stairs, the conversation echoing in his mind. That small, terrified child was shouldering the blame for a situation the adults around her had created. He walked into his study and picked up his phone. A decision was taking shape, and he knew it was a critical one. He dialed the number for his personal assistant. Claire, cancel all of my appointments for the rest of the day. Is there a problem, Mr. Croft? No, not a problem, he said, the words feeling inadequate. Just a situation here at home that requires my full attention. Please, just clear the schedule. After hanging up, Julian began to pace the length of his study. His life had become an empty, predictable routine since Isabel's death. Work, return to the silent penthouse, eat a solitary dinner, stare at the city lights, sleep, and then repeat. When Isabel was alive, they had often talked about having children. She used to stand by the vast floor-to-ceiling windows and say the apartment felt too big, too quiet for just 2 people. She said it was missing life, movement, the sound of child's laughter echoing off the marble floors. One day we'll adopt a child who needs a safe place, she used to say, her eyes full of warmth. There's so many kids in this world who just need a family. But after she was gone, Julian had buried those dreams along with the crushing weight of his memories. An hour later, Elena descended the stairs, holding Anya in her arms. The child was awake but calm, her head resting on her mother's shoulder, her wary eyes fixed on a man standing by the window. Mr. Croft will be leaving now, Elena said softly. Thank you for your patience. Wait, he said, holding up a hand but keeping his distance so as not to frighten the girl again. I want to make you a proposal. A proposal? Sir, Anya needs therapy, he stated. Not as a question, but as a fact. And you need a stable job to support the 2 of you. Yes, but... So, instead of working 3 days here and running yourself into the ground the rest of the week, I propose you work here full-time. Elena looked at him, completely baffled. But sir, there isn't enough work. Not as a housekeeper, he clarified. As a household manager. You would organize my personal schedule, coordinate maintenance, manage the accounts at home. You would run this place. He paused, then named a figure. The position would pay a salary of $60,000 a year, plus a healthcare stipend. Elena swayed slightly, as if the number itself were a physical blow. Mr. Croft, that's... There's one more condition, he said. Her heart sank, bracing for the inevitable catch. What is it? Anya comes with you, he stated plainly. There's an empty guest suite upstairs. It can be her room to use while you're here. We can furnish it with a drawing table, toys, whatever she needs to feel safe. Elena was silent for a full minute, her mind struggling to process the impossible generosity of the offer. Mr. Croft, she finally whispered, I don't understand. Why would you do all of this? Julian looked past her, at the small girl who was now peeking at him over her mother's shoulder, her terror having been replaced by a cautious curiosity. Because this home has been an empty, perfectly designed space for a very long time, he said, his voice quiet and reflective. And perhaps you too need a sanctuary just as much as this place needs a purpose. A purpose? To be more than just walls and a view, he clarified. To do something that actually matters. To help someone who needs it. Anya saw him looking at her and quickly whispered something in her mother's ear. A faint smile touched Elena's lips. What did she say? Julian asked, a genuine curiosity in his voice. A faint smile touched Elena's lips. She asked if you're the man who keeps the sky and the windows. Julian furrowed his brow. Why would she ask that? Because she saw the whole city from the window upstairs, Elena explained. She said that only someone very important could be in charge of a view so big and beautiful. For the first time in 5 years, a genuine, unforced smile spread across Julian Croft's face. "Tell her yes," he said. "I'm in charge of the view, and if she likes later tonight, I can show her where all the best constellations appear." Anya heard him and whispered something else into her mother's ear. Elena's smile widened. She wants to know if you get angry at the stars when they don't shine bright enough. "No," Julian replied, speaking directly to Anya for the first time, his voice low and gentle. "You never get angry at the stars. They just need the darkness to be seen properly. Some things just need the right conditions to shine, just like little girls." For a brief, significant moment, Anya met his gaze directly before shyly burying her face in her mother's shoulder again. "Can I think about your proposal, Mr. Croft?" Elena asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Of course," he said. "But while you think, why don't you both stay for dinner? I was about to order a pizza." "Oh no, sir, we couldn't possibly impose." "It's not an imposition," Julian insisted. "It has been a very long time since this table was set for more than one person." Elena looked down at her daughter, who had been listening intently. "What do you think, Anya? Should we stay for dinner?" The little girl considered it for a few seconds. "Will he sit far away from me?" "If you like," Julian offered. "I can eat at the kitchen counter." "No," Anya said, her voice so quiet it was almost a thought, surprising them both. "That's okay. Just use a quiet voice." And during that dinner, something remarkable happened. Anya, who at first sat at the extreme opposite end of the long dining table, began to inch closer. First, she moved the chair beside her mother. Then, when Julian noticed her looking at the architectural models across the room and began telling a quiet story about how he designed a children's hospital to make sure every single room had a big, hopeful window to the sky, she slid her chair a little closer still. In the vast, silent penthouse, in the soft glow of the city lights, a space that had been empty for years finally began to feel like a home. "Did you save the little bird?" she asked, her voice small but clear, speaking directly to him for the first time. "I did," Julian answered softly. His wing was broken, but with some care and patience, he got strong again. "Where is he now?" "He flew away," Julian said. "Flew somewhere beautiful to start a family of his own." Anya grew quiet and thoughtful. "Sometimes," she whispered, "I wish I could fly far away, too." "Why is that?" he asked gently. "So I wouldn't have to be afraid anymore." Julian felt that now familiar tightness in his chest. "You know what that little bird taught me?" he asked. "What?" "That you don't have to fly far away to stop being afraid," he said, looking at her. "Sometimes you just have to find one place where you feel completely safe." Anya looked at her mother, then back at Julian. After a moment, she said, "This feels like a safe place." "It can be," he replied, "if you want it to be." Later that night, as Elena was helping Anya with her coat to leave, the little girl suddenly broke away and ran back to where Julian stood in the doorway. "Thank you for the pizza," she said, still keeping a careful distance. "You're welcome," he replied. "Thank you for telling me about the sky and the windows. Can I draw another picture for you?" "I would love that," he said. "I'll draw you in your buildings," she declared. "But I'll make sure to draw happy people in all the windows this time. No scribbles." A real warm smile touched Julian's eyes. "I think that will be the most beautiful drawing I have ever received." The next morning, Elena arrived earlier than usual. Julian was in the kitchen, looking over blueprints when she entered. "I thought about your proposal all night," she said, her voice steady. "And I accept." "I'm glad. But I have one condition," she added. "What is it?" "If you ever regret this decision, or if Anya ever causes a problem or becomes a disruption, I need you to be honest with me. I cannot accept this out of pity. Agreed?" "Agreed," Julian said without hesitation. "But I have a condition for you, too. You must be honest with me about anything you or Anya need to make this work." He extended his hand, and she took it. They shook on it, sealing an agreement that would fundamentally reshape the architecture of both their lives. The first few weeks were an adjustment. Anya still had moments of anxiety when Julian entered a room without warning, but they grew fewer and farther between. And slowly, the vast, silent penthouse began to change. The sterile quiet was now punctuated by the soft scratch of crayons on paper, and more often, the gentle, hopeful humming of a little girl who was finally finding a place where she felt safe enough to shine. Julian learned the new rhythms of his home. He learned to announce his presence with soft clearing of his throat when he entered a room, to always keep his voice low and measured when Anya was near, and to give her a wide, respectful berth. A week later, the first true sign of progress emerged. Julian was in his home studio, meticulously placing a miniature tree onto a large architectural model. When he sensed a small presence behind him, he turned slowly and saw Anya, standing a few feet away, watching him. "Can I watch you build a tiny city?" she asked. "Of course," he said. "Do you want to stay there, or would you like to come closer?" "Closer," she whispered, "but just a little bit." She approached with the cautious curiosity of a fawn. "Why are your hands so careful with all the little pieces?" she asked, her eyes wide. "Because every piece," Julian explained, "no matter how small, is important. It has to be treated gently, or the whole structure will be weak. My wife taught me that." "Where is your wife?" The question was so direct, so innocent. Julian paused his work. "She went to live in a place that's very far away," he said. "A place I can't visit." "Why?" "Because sometimes he struggled for the right words. The people we love have to leave us, even when we want them to stay more than anything in the world." Anya was quiet for a long moment, processing this. "Does it make you sad?" "Sometimes," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "But building the things we dreamed together, it helps me remember the good times." She looked at the model, then back at him. "Can I help you build? Would you like to?" "Yes," she said with sudden certainty. "My mom said you're a good man," she stated simply. "And good men don't build broken houses." The simple profundity of her words struck Julian in a way nothing had in years. In the days that followed, Anya became a quiet fixture in the studio. At first, she would just watch. Then, he set up a small table for her, with scraps of balsa wood and child-safe glue. Eventually, he began letting her help, entrusting her with placing the tiny trees and park benches in a specific corner of his model city, a small, perfect world he had reserved especially for her. "It's a friendship house," Anya explained one afternoon in the studio, carefully placing a small, crooked door onto a lopsided structure she had built from scrap wood. "And why is it a friendship house?" Julian asked, smiling. "'Cause a house is for everybody," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "It doesn't matter if you're big or little, a boy or a girl. A good house keeps everyone safe from the rain." The simple wisdom of her words impressed Julian daily. She had a unique and beautiful way of seeing the world, a lens that was still intact despite all the trauma that had tried to shatter it. From the doorway, Elena would watch these interactions, a quiet mix of relief and hope blooming in her chest. For the first time since she had fled her old life, she saw her daughter completely at ease in the presence of a man. About a month into their new routine, an incident occurred that tested all the fragile progress they had made. Julian was on an important conference call in his office when he heard a sudden crash from the studio, followed by a piercing shriek. He quickly ended the call and rushed in to find Anya backed against the wall in absolute panic, pointing with a trembling finger to the floor. An intricate model of a concert hall, one of his earliest and most personal designs, lay on its side, a delicate spire shattered into a dozen pieces. "I broke it. I just bumped the table and it fell. I broke it," she cried, her voice escalating with each word. Elena wasn't there. She had just stepped out to pick up some groceries. For the first time, Julian was alone with Anya in a full-blown crisis. "Anya, it's okay," he said, keeping his voice incredibly calm, though his heart was pounding. "It's just a model. It was an accident." "No," she sobbed, shaking her head violently. "You're going to punish me. You're going to yell and throw things, just like my father did." She was trembling so hard that Julian was afraid she might fall. "Anya, look at me," he said, slowly lowering himself to his knees to be at her level, but maintaining the distance between them. "Look at my face. Am I yelling?" She risked a glance, tears streaming down her cheeks, and shook her head. "No." "And do you see me throwing things?" She shook her head again. "So," he asked, his voice softer than he knew he was capable of, "do you really think I'm going to start now?" She stared at him, her small body racked with fear and confusion, and whispered, "I don't know." "Then let me show you what happens when something breaks in this house," Julian said, his voice soft but firm. "Watch me." Anya watched, her breath hitched in her throat, as he walked to a shelf that held his own smaller, simpler models. He picked up a perfectly constructed model of a small, modern house, held it for a moment, and then deliberately let it drop to the floor. It shattered into a dozen pieces. "There," he said calmly, turning back to her. "Now, We have both broken a house today. Did you see me yell at myself?" A small, watery, incredulous giggle escaped Anya's lips. "No. So," he said, offering a small, reassuring smile. "Let's clean up all the pieces together. And then we can have some hot chocolate. How does that sound? But what if Mama is mad at me?" "Your mother would never be angry with you for an accident," Julian said with absolute certainty. "She loves you more than all the buildings in New York City." As they carefully swept up the broken pieces together, Anya spoke in a small voice. "My father, he used to get so mad. If I dropped a plate or spilled my juice, he would scream. He said I was clumsy and that I ruined everything I touched." She looked down at the dustpan full of broken wood. "Sometimes, I think he was right." Julian stopped what he was doing and looked at her. "Can I tell you what I think?" he asked. She nodded. "I think you are one of the most careful and creative people I have ever met. I've watched you in the studio. You treat every tiny piece I would like it a treasure. You build wonderful, imaginative things, and you always ask permission before you touch anything." "But I broke your concert hall," she whispered. "Everyone breaks things sometimes, Anya," he said gently. "Even grown-ups who are supposed to know better. Breaking something isn't what matters. What matters is how we decide to fix it afterward." From that day on, something fundamental shifted between them. Anya began to see Julian not as a looming potential threat, but as a quiet, protective presence in her life, an architect of safety. The true measure of that change came 2 weeks later. Elena was packing Anya's backpack, getting ready to head home for the evening. Anya walked into the studio, where Julian was sketching at his desk. She was holding a picture book in her small hands. She approached him without hesitation, held it up, and asked the one question that meant more than anything else. "Before we go, will you read me a story?" "But only," Anya stipulated, "if you promise not to make a loud, crashing sound if one of the buildings in the story falls down. Loud noises are scary." "I promise," Julian said, his voice a soft reassurance. "I'll read it very quietly, just like when we build our models." And that evening, as he read a story about a magical city, his voice a calm and steady presence in a quiet room, Julian realized with startling clarity that he was being healed, too. The penthouse, which for 5 years had been a sterile monument to his grief, was finally, truly, becoming a home. The months that followed brought a quiet and steady transformation for all of them. Elena, it turned out, had a remarkable talent for administration. She organized the complex workings of Julian's household with architect's precision, creating a seamless efficiency he had never managed on his own. Her teaching skills also reemerged as she helped Anya with her schoolwork, finding creative ways to make learning feel like a game. "My teacher says my drawings of buildings are much happier now," Anya announced one night over dinner. And she said, "I don't hide in the reading corner at school anymore." "Why do you think that is?" Julian asked gently. Anya thought for a moment. "Because now I know that there's at least one house in the city that's safe inside," she said. "So that means maybe there are other safe houses, too." The simple power of her statement resonated deep within Julian. He wasn't just providing a job in a safe space. He was helping to rebuild a child's entire worldview, one safe house at a time. Anya's progress astonished her therapist. Her generalized anxiety has plummeted, the doctor reported during a meeting with Elena and Julian. She's engaging with her peers and feels secure enough to explore her environment again. Whatever you are all doing at home, that foundation of stability is working miracles. What else does she need? Elena asked, her voice full of hope. To be completely healed? The therapist smiled warmly. More of the same. Time, patience, and the unwavering sense of security that you have so clearly built for her. And how long might that take? Julian asked. With the progress she's making. The therapist replied, looking between the two of them. The worst is long behind you. You're not just healing a trauma anymore. You're building a future. That hopeful prognosis filled the penthouse with a sense of light and possibility, but also cast an unexpected shadow in Julian's mind. When Anya was completely healed, what reason would Elena and her daughter have to stay? His role as a provider of sanctuary would be complete. The insecurity gnawed at him, prompted him to do something he hadn't done in years. He called his sister Charlotte, a sharp-witted gallery owner in London. "Julian?" "Good heavens," she answered, her voice crackling across the Atlantic. "To what do I owe the transcontinental honor? It's been months." "Everything is fine, Char. I needed to tell you something." He recounted the entire story, from the first chaotic afternoon to the therapist's optimistic report. There was a long silence on the other end of the line before she spoke. "My God, Julian," she said, her voice a mix of shock and amusement. "You haven't just hired a household manager. You've accidentally built yourself a family." "What? That's ridiculous. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement." "Listen to yourself," she countered. "The way you talk about them, they're not just employees. They're the central support structure for your entire life, not just a penthouse." "It's not like that, Charlotte. I'm just helping them." "Julian, I'm your sister. I've known you your entire life. Are you trying to tell me you're in love with a 7-year-old? He scoffed at the absurdity. "Don't be an idiot," she said, laughing. "You're in love with being a father, and I have a strong suspicion you're halfway in love with a mother, too. But that's your blueprint to figure out, not mine." The conversation planted a seed of profound self-questioning in Julian's mind. He couldn't deny the truth in her words. He had grown accustomed not just to Anya's quiet presence in his studio, but to his intelligent, calming conversations with Elena, to the scent of her cooking wafting from the kitchen, to the sound of shared, easy laughter echoing in rooms that had been silent for years. But would it be fair to develop feelings for an employee, for a woman who depended on him financially? How could he ever broach such a subject without putting her in an impossibly vulnerable position? His ethical dilemma was abruptly interrupted. One afternoon, Elena's phone rang. As she listened, the color drained from her face. She hung up and turned to Julian, her professional composure completely gone, replaced by raw, maternal fear. "Mr. Croft, I have to leave." "Immediately," she said, her voice trembling. "It's the school. Anya, she's had an incident." "What kind of incident?" Julian asked, his voice sharp with concern. "A new boy started in her class today," Elena explained. Her words rushed and panicked. "Apparently he looks like her father. The same build, the same color hair." She saw him across the classroom and just shut down. Julian was already grabbing his coat from the closet. "I'm coming with you." "Mr. Croft, you don't have to, Elena," he said, cutting her off with a firmness that was both new and comforting. "We're a team now. If Anya is in trouble, I'm there." At the school, they found Anya huddled under a small table in the library, refusing to speak to or even look at her teachers. "She's been like this for nearly an hour," the principal explained, her face etched with worry. "We didn't know who else to call." Julian walked slowly toward the table and knelt on the floor, making sure she could see his shoes. "Anya," he said softly. "It's Julian. Can you hear me?" A tiny, muffled sob was his only answer. "I know you're very scared right now," he continued. "But do you remember what we talked about? About finding a safe room with strong windows?" "I remember," came a choked whisper. "Well, you're in a safe room right now," he said. "Your mother is here. I am here. And no one is going to hurt you." He paused. "That new boy outside, he looks like the man who hurt you. And that's a very scary thing." "I understand." He took a breath. "So, how about this? I'm an architect. It's my job to inspect structures to make sure they're safe. What if I go out there and inspect this new boy's foundation? I'll talk to him, see what he's made of, and then I will come back and give you a full, honest report. Would that be okay?" "You do that?" "Of course," he said. "And if I decide he's an unsafe structure, he will not get anywhere near this library. You have my word." Slowly, hesitantly, Anya crawled out from under the table. Her face was blotchy and stained with tears, but she collapsed into her mother's waiting arms and, for the first time, allowed Julian to stand close by during a moment of crisis. The new boy, whose name was Leo, did bear a passing physical resemblance to the man from Anya's past, but his demeanor was the absolute opposite. He was a shy, quiet boy clutching a sketchbook, looking just as terrified as Anya felt to be the new kid in school. "Would you like me to introduce you?" Julian offered gently to Anya. She looked at the boy, then at Julian. Will he get mad if I say the wrong thing?" Julian turned to the other child. "Leo," he asked kindly, "are you the kind of person who gets angry when someone is nervous and trying their best?" The boy shook his head immediately. "No, sir," he mumbled. "I get nervous, too." "My mom says yelling is for people with bad manners," Leo mumbled, looking at his shoes. Anya looked from the boy to Julian, a wave of understanding washing over her face. "So," she declared with the quiet confidence of an engineer signing off on a blueprint, "his foundation is strong." The introduction, carefully and gradually managed by Julian, ended with Anya and Leo sitting on the library floor, sketchbooks open, discovering a shared love for drawing skylines and fantastical animals. In the car on the way home, the city lights sliding past the windows, Anya spoke in the backseat, her voice clear and thoughtful. Julian, you would be a very good dad. He was so taken aback. He could only glance in the rear-view mirror. What makes you say that, Anya? Because, she explained logically, you weren't afraid to do a structural inspection on Leo to make sure he was safe, and you gave me the full report before I had to decide if I wanted to get close. Elena and Julian's eyes met in the mirror, a silent, profound understanding passing between them. And would you like to have a dad, sweetie? Elena asked softly. Yes, Anya replied, but only if he was like Julian. Someone who builds safe houses, uses a quiet voice, and knows how to fix things when they get broken. That night, long after Anya was asleep, Julian and Elena sat in the living room, the sprawling cityscape a silent witness below. It was the first time they had sat together not as employer and employee, but as two people sharing a quiet space. Thank you, she said, breaking the silence, for what you did today at the school. It was the only thing to do, he replied. I care about her, Elena. You know that. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Can I ask you a personal question? Of course. What would Isabel, my wife, what would she have thought, seeing you and Anya here? He looked out the massive window for a long time before answering. Isabel always said this place was a beautiful museum. Perfect, but empty. She said it needed life. Fingerprints on the glass, crayon drawings taped to the fridge, the sound of bare feet running down the hall. And now, Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. He turned from the window to look at her, his gaze direct and full of feelings she'd been too afraid to name. Now, he said, I wake up every morning and I actually want to come home, because I know you and Anya will be here. Elena took a shaky breath, knowing it was time for her own honest, terrifying report. Julian, I have to tell you something. What is it? I'm not just here because of the job anymore, she began, her voice trembling slightly. This house, you and Anya, you become our family, and I don't know how to handle that. Why not? He asked gently. Because I am so afraid that I'm feeling things I'm not supposed to feel. What kind of things? She finally met his eyes, her heart open and vulnerable. I'm falling in love with you, Julian, she confessed, and I know that complicates everything. The silence that followed her confession was deep and profound, filled with the unspoken emotions of the past several months. Julian looked at her, his heart laid bare. Elena, he said, his voice thick with feeling. I have feelings for you, too. Deeply. But I'm terrified of getting the blueprint wrong. Afraid of what? She whispered. Afraid you'll feel pressured because you work here. Afraid Anya will get hurt if we fail. Afraid I can't be the man that you and she deserve. Elena moved from her chair to sit beside him on the sofa, her presence a source of warmth and strength. Julian, look at me, she said, waiting until he did. You are already the man we deserve. You saved my daughter, and in doing so, you saved me, too. How did I save you? You gave me back my dignity, she explained. For so long, I was just a cleaner, a ghost. You saw a person with skills. You trusted me. You value my opinion. You treated me as an equal. Because you are my equal, Elena, he said. In fact, in many ways, your designs of life are far superior to mine. And that night, with the lights of New York City twinkling like a million fallen stars below them, they kissed. It was a kiss that sealed a foundation that had been setting for months, a quiet promise of a future to be built together. But a structure is never truly tested until it faces a storm. 2 weeks later, that storm arrived. Elena received a frantic call from Anya's school. Geronimo, she said to Julian, her face pale with dread after she hung up. My ex-husband, he was at the school. He asked to see Anya. Julian was on his feet in an instant. Did they let him? No. The principal said Anya wasn't prepared, but Julian, he's her biological father. He has rights. I'm calling my lawyer, Julian said, his voice hard as steel. Anya's psychological safety is non-negotiable. She cannot be exposed to him now. The news sent Elena into a spiral of old fears. He'll try to take her from me, she cried, pacing the floor. He always swore he would if I ever found happiness, if I ever rebuilt my life. Nothing is going to happen to Anya, Julian promised, his voice a bedrock of certainty. Not while I'm here. But you don't understand him, she insisted, her voice cracking. He's a master manipulator. He'll go to the court. He'll invent stories. He'll say I'm an unfit mother living with a strange man. Julian crossed the room and gently took her by the shoulders, forcing her to stop pacing and look at him. Elena, breathe, he commanded softly but with unshakable authority. He may be a manipulator, but I am a world-class architect." He looked directly into her eyes, a silent vow passing between them. "And we," he said, his voice dropping to a low, determined promise, "are going to build a fortress of love and law around your daughter that he will never penetrate. We will do this together." Anya, with a child's unerring sensitivity, perceived the shift in the atmosphere. The quiet hum of the penthouse was now threaded with a quiet tension. She found Julian in his studio and asked, her voice small, "Mama is worried. It's because of him, isn't it?" "Your mom is worried." Julian corrected her gently, "But we are a team and we will handle it. We will make sure you are always safe." "But what if he makes me leave here?" Julian immediately put down the drafting pen he was holding and knelt to her level. "Anya, look at me. Do you want to leave this place?" "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "This is my safe house. You and Mama are my family now." "Then no one," he said, with a conviction that was absolute, "is ever going to take you from your home or your family. I promise." "But how can you stop him?" "Because there are rules, Anya. Laws. They're designed, like a good building, to protect people. And more importantly," he added, his voice softening, "when you love someone very, very much, you build walls so high and so strong that nothing bad can ever get in." That night, Julian made a decision that would change the blueprint of their lives forever. He asked Elena to marry him. "I know this may seem sudden," he said, taking her hands in his, "but I want to make this official. I want to build a permanent structure for our family. With me as your husband and as Anya's legal stepfather, his threats will become powerless." Elena looked at him, her eyes shining with tears. "Julian, are you absolutely sure? A marriage is the most serious project." "I have never been more certain of design in my life," he said firmly. "I love you both, and I want to spend the rest of my life protecting and caring for our family." "And Anya?" she asked. "We'll talk to her first, of course." Anya's reaction was more wonderful than they could have imagined. "You're going to build a family? For real?" she asked, her eyes wide with excitement. "Like, with official paperwork and everything?" "If you want us to," Julian said, smiling. "Yes. Can I be the architect's assistant?" "You can be anything you want to be, my love," Elena said, her heart overflowing. Anya turned to Julian, her expression suddenly serious. "And after you're married, will you be my dad? For real?" "If you'll have me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes," she whispered. "But you have to promise you will never, ever use a loud, angry dad voice." "I promise," he said, his own eyes now wet with tears. "Forever." Their wedding was a small, intimate ceremony held right there in the penthouse, in front of the massive wall windows overlooking the city they all loved. Anya, their official architect assistant, wore a simple dress the color of the twilight sky, and as the officiant spoke of building a life together, she didn't carry a basket of flower petals. Instead, at the perfect moment, she walked forward and presented a single, beautifully drawn blueprint of a house with 3 happy, smiling figures inside, a masterpiece of her own design, a final, crucial plan for a family and a home built to last forever. Geronimo attempted to interfere, launching a legal battlefield by pride and malice, but he quickly discovered his position was untenable. The detailed report from Anya's therapist was a final, decisive blow. To remove the child from the meticulously constructed, safe, and stable environment in which she is not only healed but is now thriving, the doctor wrote, would be an act of profound and irreversible psychological harm. Faced with a mountain of evidence in Julian's formidable legal team, Anya's father eventually withdrew his claim, vanishing from their lives for good. A year after the wedding, Julian officially adopted Anya. In the judge's chambers, she didn't present a drawing, but a small, carefully constructed architectural model of a house she had made herself. She placed it on the judge's desk. Inside were 3 small, hand-painted figures. "This is my dad, Julian," she explained with quiet confidence, pointing to the male figure. "He's an architect. He builds strong houses and he never, ever yells." She pointed to the next figure. "This is my mom, Elena. She manages everything and teaches me how to design things." Finally, she pointed to the small girl standing between them. "And that's me. We're all inside because now I have a complete family." The judge, a kind woman with tears in her eyes, approved the adoption without a moment's hesitation. Today, 3 years after that first chaotic afternoon, the penthouse overlooking Central Park is a completely different space. The minimalist silence has been replaced by the warm hum of life. Anya's colorful drawings and her own burgeoning architectural models are proudly displayed on shelves and tables. The studio is now a shared creative space where Julian and Anya often work on projects together, the scent with glue and paper mingling in the air. The once shy, traumatized girl has blossomed into a confident, funny, and deeply caring child, showing no signs of the trauma that once nearly erased her future. One Sunday afternoon, Julian and Anya, now a mature and thoughtful 10-year-old, were working side by side on a complex model of a new library. "Do you remember," Julian asked gently, "when you used to be afraid to even come in this room?" "I remember," she said, not looking up from the delicate window frame she was carefully fitting into place. "But that was before I knew. You taught me that not all men are the same. You taught me the difference between a good man and a bad man." "And how do you know the difference?" he asked, his heart full. Anya placed a final piece, looked at their shared creation, and then looked up at him, her eyes clear and bright with a wisdom beyond her years. "It's simple," she said. "A bad man breaks things." She smiled, a radiant expression of pure love and security. "A good man builds things." And, she added, reaching out to gently tap the roof of the model library they had just finished, "he always makes sure to leave plenty of room for his family to grow." "A bad man yells," she continued, her voice clear and sure. "He breaks things and makes everyone feel small and afraid." Elena, who now managed not only the penthouse, but also a charitable foundation Julian had established to design and build safe community spaces for families in need, watched them from the doorway, her heart full. "Do you know what the most beautiful part of this whole design is?" she asked softly. Father and daughter looked up at her. "What?" they asked in unison. "It's that we all saved each other," she said, her voice warm with love. "Julian, you saved us by giving us a safe place and an opportunity. Anya, you saved Julian by filling his silent world with light and purpose. And I," she smiled, "I save you both by showing you that the strongest structures aren't built in a hurry. They're built with patience." That night, as Julian tucked Anya into bed, he reflected on the almost impossible series of events that had led them here. What if he hadn't come home early that day? What if Elena hadn't found the courage to stop him in the foyer? What if his first reaction had been anger instead of reluctant, world-changing curiosity? "Dad," Anya murmured, her eyes already heavy with sleep. "Yes, my daughter?" "Thank you," she whispered, "for finishing our building." He leaned closer. "What building, sweetheart?" "Me and Mama," she explained, her voice a sleepy sigh. "We were like an unfinished blueprint when we got here, all messy and scared. But you were so careful and patient, and you helped us build ourselves up strong." Tears welled in Julian's eyes as he leaned down to kiss her forehead. "Thank you," he whispered back, his voice thick with emotion, "for letting me be your architect." "Welcome, Dad," she mumbled, already drifting into dreams. "Tomorrow, can we design a new city?" He smoothed her hair back from her face. His heart overflowed with a love so profound it felt like it could reconstruct the world. "Tomorrow and always, my daughter," he promised. "Always." Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey of healing, family, and love. If this story touched your heart, please consider showing your support by leaving a like and subscribing to our channel so you don't miss out on more amazing stories like this one. We would love to hear from you in the comments below. Let us know which part of the story impacted you the most. Your engagement means the world to us and helps our community grow. See you in the next story.